Once upon a time, there was a young girl named Cinderella. She lived with her dad, her stepmother, and her 2 stepsisters. Now, most step families are lovely, kind people, but Cinderella's stepmother wasn't, and her stepsisters were absolutely horrid. One day, Cinderella's dad said, "I have to go away for a while. I will come home soon. Look after each other." But while he was hugging his wife goodbye, Cinderella's stepsisters were already pinching Cinderella and pulling her hair. They loved to boss her around. "Cinderella, wash my clothes. Cinderella, scrub my toilet. Cinderella, make me another glass of orange squash." Cinderella's clothes became dirty and tattered, and when she asked for new clothes, her stepmother only laughed at her, while her stepsisters had new dresses every week. One day, a smart man in a fancy coat came to the house with a long scroll. "On behalf of the prince, all the young single ladies in the kingdom are hereby invited to a great big party at the palace tomorrow night. Be there or be square." He looked at stepmother. "The prince is looking for a bride," he whispered with a wink. Cinderella's stepmother was very excited. That night, she dreamed of the jewels and dresses she could buy if one of her daughters became queen. Cinderella's stepsisters were very excited too. They both dreamed of being married to the very handsome prince and having servants and maids and cooks and cleaners, hundreds of people to boss around instead of just one. Cinderella just dreamed of getting out of the house for a couple of hours. The next day, Cinderella's stepsisters spent hours getting ready for the party. They caught Cinderella looking through her old dresses. "You don't think you'll be going to the party, do you?" they said, and they laughed and laughed. Cinderella went to her stepmother and begged her. "Please," she said, "I won't get in the way, I promise." Her stepmother thought about it for a moment, and then a cruel smile curled on her lips. "Of course you may go to the party, Cinderella, just as soon as you've finished your chores." Cinderella worked harder than ever. She even helped her stepsisters paint their horrible toenails on their huge, stinky feet. When she was finished, she found an old pink dress and tried her best to fix some of the holes. She brushed her hair and scrubbed her face until she almost felt clean. "Time to go, daughters," called stepmother. "Don't you all look lovely?" Cinderella's heart skipped a beat. Her stepmother had never said anything so nice to her before, or called her daughter. Maybe things were going to change for the better. But then, stepmother said, Cinderella, haven't you forgotten something?" Cinderella looked herself up and down. "I don't think so, stepmother." "The kitchen?" Cinderella was confused. She most certainly had not forgotten to clean the kitchen. She'd polished the surfaces, scrubbed the floor, she'd even cleaned the stove and reorganised the pantry. She had left it all sparkling. Stepmother slowly pushed open the door, and Cinderella gasped. There was mess everywhere. A bag of flour had been knocked all over the floor. A pot looked like it had been left to boil over and had left a sticky pink mess all over the stove. Someone had made scrambled egg and left the pan for her to clean. That would be half an hour on its own. Cinderella's heart sank down to her toes. "Stepmother, perhaps I could finish this after the party," she said. "Absolutely not," her stepmother said cruelly. "We had an agreement, Cinderella." And with that, she hurried the 2 horrid stepsisters out of the house and off to the party. Cinderella was heartbroken. She just wanted to get out of the house and feel like a normal girl, just for a couple of hours. She started scrubbing the egg pan, and as she did, she started to cry. She closed her eyes and wished for a miracle. "Don't cry, Cindy," said a voice, and Cinderella turned to see a little old woman in a sparkling robe sitting on the table. The fairy godmother clicked her fingers, and the kitchen was spotless, even the egg pan. Cinderella just looked at her with her mouth open, but the magical old woman wasn't finished yet. She clicked her fingers again, and Cinderella's grubby old dress transformed into a gorgeous sparkly gown. On her feet were a pair of beautiful and unexpectedly comfortable glass slippers. Cinderella was amazed. She started to say thank you, but the fairy godmother said, "Oh, we haven't got time for all that. We've got to get you to the party." She looked around and said, "You don't happen to have any animals around here, do you?" The fairy godmother clicked her fingers once more, and they found themselves outside. 6 mice were lined up in front of a pumpkin. A horse was standing next to it, and a dog was waiting patiently at the back. Cinderella thought maybe the fairy godmother's magic had run out, or that maybe she herself was going a bit mad. But at another click of her fingers, the fairy godmother changed the mice into 6 horses, the horse into a driver, and the dog into a footman, and the pumpkin into the most beautiful golden carriage. Cinderella was stunned. "Now, Cindy, there's only one thing to remember. You must leave the party before midnight. Promise?" "Promise," said Cinderella, and she kissed the fairy godmother on the cheek before climbing into the carriage. When Cinderella arrived at the palace, she didn't want to waste any more time and hurried up the steps. The music was absolutely wicked, and Cinderella couldn't help but run to the dance floor and start throwing some wild shapes. The prince noticed her right away. All the other girls were standing around, too nervous to dance, but this girl could really move. He joined her, and the pair of them danced together all night. It was heaven. Cinderella saw her stepmother and sisters watching her, and she suddenly remembered the fairy godmother's warning. She checked the clock and saw it was almost midnight. "I've got to go!" she shouted, and she tried to give the prince her name, but the music was too loud and he couldn't hear her. She turned and ran from the dance floor in such a hurry that she left one of her glass slippers behind. She ran all the way home and went straight to bed, still dreaming of the prince and his amazing dance moves. The very next day, the fancy coat man was back with another scroll. "The prince would like to find and marry the girl in the sparkly dress with the radical dance moves," he announced. He didn't quite catch her name, but this is her shoe, and he held up the glass slipper she had dropped. Cinderella's sisters looked at each other for a moment, and then both shrieked, "It's mine! It's mine!" Cinderella watched as each sister tried on the shoe and tried not to laugh when their great big smelly feet simply would not fit. Cinderella said, "May I try?" Her stepmother was furious and tried to push her back into the kitchen, but the fancy coat man frowned at her and said, "All the young ladies must try the shoe, even the grubby ones." Cinderella slipped the shoe on with ease and smiled at the fancy coat man as she pulled the other one from her pocket. Cinderella's stepmother and sisters couldn't believe their eyes. "You!" they cried. But quickly they realised that they would still get to be part of the royal family and said, "Oh, Cinderella, how exciting! We can't wait for the royal wedding." Cinderella frowned and said, "Aren't you forgetting something?" Her stepmother and sisters stopped jumping up and down and said, "What?" "You'll have to finish your chores first," said Cinderella. And with that, she left the house and her stepmother and sisters and went off to marry the prince. And they lived happily ever after. What became of the stepmother and sisters, you ask? Well, after a while, Cinderella's dad came home from his travels, and he gave them a pretty serious telling off for being so horrid. After that day, they promised to be nice to everyone forever. And wouldn't you believe it? They actually were. The 3 Little Pigs. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs. The first pig loved to play and have fun. She would spend hours out in the fields making daisy chains and climbing trees. The second pig was very good looking. He liked to go down to the pond and look at his reflection all day. The third pig was extremely clever. He liked to stay in his bedroom reading books and doing sums. But sometimes the little pigs would forget to help Mummy and Daddy Pig with the chores, and this made them feel very cross. One day, Mummy Pig said, "I've had enough of you 3 lazy little pigs. This house is a terrible mess, and you 3 don't help at all. In fact, you make it 10 times worse. It's time you grew up and moved out. Then maybe I'll have a chance to make daisy chains down by the pond, and maybe even finish my book." The three little pigs were a bit sad that they were being turfed out. But the third very clever little pig said, "If we all have our own houses, no one can make us do any chores." The other little pigs liked this idea, so they packed their bags with everything they would need out in the big wide world. Mummy Pig waved them off with her handkerchief. "Watch out for the big bad wolf," she cried after them. "What did she say?" said the first pig. "Wasn't listening," said the second pig. "Me neither," said the third pig. The three little pigs shrugged their shoulders and off they went. After a while, the three little pigs walked past a huge meadow full of wild flowers, and the first pig stopped to have a look. She was getting a bit bored of walking and wished she could go and play. Just then, a big red tractor with a trailer full of straw came bumping along down the road behind them. As the tractor came closer, it went over a huge bump and a bale of hay fell off the back. "That'll do," the first pig said, and hugged the other little pigs goodbye. She quickly made a sweet little house out of the straw. It was a bit of a rush job, and it wasn't very sturdy or strong, but it was cosy enough, and the first pig spent the rest of the day picking flowers and playing in the meadow. The second pig and third pig carried on down the road, and after a while they walked past a big, wide, lazy river and stopped for a drink. The second pig wished he could stay longer, and, as luck would have it, another big red tractor came bumping down the road, this time with a trailer full of sticks. As the tractor came closer, it went over a huge bump and a bundle of sticks fell off the back. "That'll do," the second pig said, and hugged the third pig goodbye. The second pig spent a little longer making his house, but only because he wanted it to be beautiful, not to make it sturdy or strong. When his house was finished, it looked absolutely lovely, with not a stick out of place. He spent the rest of the afternoon next to the river, admiring his gorgeous reflection. The third pig carried on down the road until he came to a lovely spot near to town, just a short walk from the library. He looked up and down the road, wishing for a tractor that something might fall off the back of. Soon enough, a tractor did come along, and wouldn't you know it, it went over a big bump and a lovely big pallet of bricks fell off the back. "That'll do," said the third pig, and got to work making his house. Now, the third pig was a bit of a smarty pants and decided to make the strongest, sturdiest house he could. He took all night building the house, and it had a smart front door and a nice big fireplace and a handsome chimney on the top. When he was finished, he closed the door and locked it behind him and sat down to do some sums. The three little pigs loved their houses, and they all lived happily ever after. Well, that's not quite true, because the big bad wolf had picked up the three little pigs' delicious scent and found himself outside the first pig's straw house in no time at all. The big bad wolf was an expert at eating piggies, and he knew just what to do. Little pig, let me come in." "Not by the hairs on my chinny chin chin, I will not let you in," replied the first pig. "Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in," howled the big bad wolf. He took an enormous deep breath, and, before he could blow it down, a gentle breeze came along and scattered the straw house in the wind, leaving the poor little pig trembling where it once stood. The big bad wolf put the first pig in his sack for later. The big bad wolf carried on down the road, following the yummy scent of the second pig. Soon enough, he came across the stick house. Little pig, let me come in." "Not by the hairs of my chinny chin chin, I will not let you in," replied the second pig. "Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in," howled the big bad wolf. He took an enormous deep breath and blew as hard as he could. The stick house wibbled and wobbled and swayed, and before long came crashing to the ground, leaving the poor little pig trembling where it once stood. The big bad wolf put the second pig in his sack for later. The big bad wolf carried on down the road, following the scrumptious scent of the third pig. Soon enough, he came across the brick house. Little pig, let me come in." "Not by the hairs on my chinny chin chin, I will not let you in," replied the third pig. "Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in," howled the big bad wolf. He took an enormous deep breath and blew as hard as he could, but nothing happened. He took an even bigger, deeper breath and blew the hardest he had ever blown. The house didn't even quiver. The big bad wolf wasn't very happy about this. He was supposed to be an expert at eating piggies. It would be really embarrassing if this little piggy got away. He tied the sack full of the first and second pigs to a tree and looked all around the house for a way in. Spying the chimney, he climbed the drain pipe and crossed the roof. It was a bit of a tight squeeze and it was quite warm, but it would be worth it, he told himself. The big bad wolf sat on the edge of the chimney and jumped. The wolf fell down, down, down the chimney, right into the fireplace below. He jumped up, howling, and found that the very end of his long tail was on fire. The wolf ran out of the door and back down the road, and he never tried to eat another pig as long as he lived. The three little pigs all laughed and danced and hugged all night. From then on, they all lived in the strong, sturdy brick house and worked together to keep it clean and tidy. The very clever third pig used his great big brain to help them use their time wisely. The very beautiful second pig showed them how to make the house look beautiful. And the very playful first pig showed them how to have fun while they worked. And they really did all live happily ever after. The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a young boy who spent all of his days sitting high up on a hill under a maple tree. He had just one job, to watch over the sheep from the big bad wolf. The wolf too had just one job, to hunt down sheep to satisfy his hunger. The boy often found himself bored. Guarding the sheep day in, day out left him wishing for a different job, or perhaps some excitement. More than anything, he hated sitting alone all day, every day. So, one day, he decided to shout, "Help! Help! A wolf is chasing the sheep, and they're all running away!" The villagers heard the boy's cries, and they all dropped what they were doing and quickly rushed to help. But when they reached the top of the hill, there was no wolf, just the boy and the sheep, peacefully resting in the greenest grass you could imagine. "Where is the wolf?" the villagers asked. "There is no wolf," the boy said, unable to stop himself from laughing. The villagers were upset. They were exhausted from running and frustrated about their interrupted work. One of the men turned around and shouted at the boy, "Don't cry wolf when there is no wolf around. Only call for help when you truly need it." The boy found all of this very amusing. He was quite the little prankster and enjoyed seeing people rush up the hill for no reason. So, the next day, the boy walked up the hill with his flock. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled again. "Help! Wolf! Help me! He's going to eat all the sheep in my flock!" Once more, the villagers dropped what they were doing and ran up the hill. And once again, there was no wolf. "Where is the wolf?" the villagers asked. "There is no wolf," the boy replied, and once again he couldn't help but laugh. Again, a man turned and firmly said, "Don't cry wolf when there isn't one around. Only call for help when you truly need it." The next morning, the boy went up the hill with his flock again. And wouldn't you know it, this time, he actually saw a real wolf hiding in the nearby forest. At first, the boy didn't know what to do, but then he started yelling, "Help! Wolf! Help!" The people in the village heard his cries, but this time they knew better and didn't come running up the hill. The villagers kept hearing his cries, but didn't move an inch. They wouldn't fall for the same trick again. Now all the sheep ran away and were lost, chased off by the wolf. The boy was very saddened by this and sat down by the tree again. But this time, there was no smile on his face. At the end of the day, The villagers waited as usual for the boy to bring back the flock of sheep. But that evening, the boy didn't return. They decided to go and see what was wrong. The villagers gathered around the boy. Through his tears, he asked, "Why didn't you come to help me? A big bad wolf chased all the sheep away. I yelled and yelled, but no one came to help." The villagers were angry because their sheep were lost. The man who had always advised the boy to stop yelling as a joke said, "Now you see, no one believes a liar. How are we supposed to know if it was real or if you just did it for your amusement again?" From that day on, the boy always told the truth. Mouse. Or at least he tried to. Once upon a time, there was a tiny little mouse. He lived with his Mama Mouse and Papa Mouse and his 500 mouse brothers and sisters in a big nest made out of grass and sticks. With that many brothers and sisters, it was hard for the mouse to stand out or make his parents proud of him. He dreamed of being special, or maybe even famous, but he found there was nothing he was really very good at. One of his sisters was an amazing singer, and one of his brothers could do all of his times tables, even 7. He had another brother who could do a backflip and another sister who painted the most beautiful finger paintings. He couldn't do any of those things. He couldn't cook, he didn't know how to build nests or invent things, he wasn't good at telling jokes or doing magic tricks. He tried everything, but was disappointed time and time again. On a particularly bad day, after the mouse was finished trying to find out if he could hold his breath underwater the longest, he decided it was time to take a break. Once he had finished coughing up water, he decided to go for a walk. "I've had enough," he said to himself. "I'll never be good at anything, and no one will ever notice me." Dripping wet and a bit embarrassed, he trudged off, away from the nest and his family. He walked through the grass and past the watering hole where the giraffes, zebras and hippos were cooling off in the midday sun. They didn't notice him either. The mouse kept going, feeling absolutely miserable. He wasn't sure where he was going, but he needed some space, away from his back-flipping, times-tabling mouse brothers and sisters. He walked across the dry, dusty ground towards an acacia tree, and looking high up at the branches, he decided to climb. For a moment, he thought perhaps this could be his talent. He could climb really well. But then he remembered that that's just a mouse thing, and it didn't make him special at all. Still, he wasn't sure what else to do, so up he went. He reached one of the top branches and stopped to rest. Just then, a huge lion with a massive fluffy mane came ambling over. The lion flopped onto the ground, sending a cloud of dust up into the air. The mouse froze. What was he going to do now? He'd have to wait until the lion left again, but it was hot, and the lion's belly looked round and full. He would be there for hours. The lion started snoring, and the mouse tried to get comfy for a long stay. Suddenly, a great big wasp came and buzzed around the mouse's head. The mouse tried to swat it away, but the wasp just kept coming back, buzzing around his head again and again. "Buzz off," the mouse whispered, careful not to wake the lion. With all of the swatting and swinging, the mouse lost his balance, and before he could stop himself, he went toppling off the branch. Down, down, down he went, and landed in a tangled heap right on top of the lion's mane. The mouse was terrified. He didn't dare move a muscle. He waited for the lion to wake up, but by some miracle, the lion stayed asleep. Slowly, carefully, the mouse freed himself from the thick mane and crept down the lion's shoulder, over his paw, and back down to the dirt. He took one last look at the lion to check he was still asleep, and finding that he was, the mouse started home, breathing a huge sigh of relief. Little did he know that the puff of air that he released vibrated one of the lion's long, wiry whiskers, and the lion opened one eye. Suddenly, the lion's huge paw came down on the mouse's head, and he was trapped. It was dark and scary under the lion's paw, and the mouse trembled. "Mmm," said the lion, licking his lips. "A tasty little afternoon snack. I do love a juicy little mouse." "No, don't eat me," squeaked the mouse. "I'll do anything." The lion thought about it for a moment. "Like what?" he asked. "Can you do a magic trick?" The mouse could not believe it. He couldn't do a magic trick to save his life, and he'd made peace with that, except now it might actually save his life. He suddenly felt very sad about it again. "I can't do anything special," the mouse said sadly. "I don't have any talents. I'm not particularly clever or handsome. But I promise that if I can ever repay you, I will. If you ever need help, I will be there." The lion paused for a moment, and then he threw his head back and laughed, a roaring, whole-body-shaking laugh. He slowly lifted his paw and came nose to nose with the mouse. "I'm not sure how you'll ever be able to do anything to repay me, tiny little mouse. But you have made me laugh harder than I've laughed in a good long while, so I will let you go." The mouse didn't look back. He ran and ran all the way home, climbed into bed and got straight under his covers. He was the luckiest mouse alive. Maybe that was his talent. In the next few days, the mouse told his brothers and sisters what had happened with the lion, but none of them believed him. No one had ever spoken to a lion and lived to tell the tale before. How typical that the only impressive thing the mouse had ever done was so fantastic that no one thought it could possibly be true. After a while, the mouse stopped bothering to tell anyone, and soon even he started to wonder whether it had really happened or whether he'd dreamt the whole thing. He gave up on trying to be special too, and instead started dressing up as a superhero at mouse kids' birthday parties. One day, when the mouse was just finishing his hero act at his niece's 6th birthday party, he heard a deafening roar, thundering across the plains. Suddenly, his promise to the lion echoed through his head, and he lurched into action. With his cape flying out behind him, he ran towards the sound as fast as his legs could carry him. All the animals at the watering hole were running too, but they ran the other way, away from the terrifying sound. The roars got louder as he got closer, and he realised the sound was one of terrified panic, not of rage. Finally, he came to the acacia tree, and underneath it he found the lion, caught in a poacher's net. He looked tired, and he was tangled up so tightly that the ropes were digging into his fur. The mouse leapt onto the lion's shoulder and got close to his ear. "I'm here," he said, with his chest bravely puffed out. "Mouse, is that you?" the lion said weakly. "Are you dressed up as a superhero?" "Doesn't matter," the mouse said. "I'm going to rescue you." And the mouse jumped down and started gnawing on the ropes that held the lion. He gnawed and chewed and munched and chomped until the ropes pinged loose and the lion sprang free. "Little mouse," the lion said, "you have saved me. How can I ever thank you?" "We're even now," the mouse replied. "My debt is repaid." "Are you absolutely sure there's nothing I can do?" the lion said. "Well," said the mouse, "there is one thing." And so, that is how the mouse came to be delivered back to his mouse brothers and mouse sisters, and Mama Mouse and Papa Mouse, riding high on top of a lion's mane, dressed as a superhero. The lion told the mouse family about his mouse friend's actions. "And he is the bravest, most daring mouse I have ever met." The mouse felt amazing. Finally, his family were proud of him. But more importantly, he felt proud of himself, because he knew that he had done the right thing when no one else could. And that made him the most special mouse of all. The end. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this magical story. If you want to come along on more of our adventures, make sure you subscribe to our channel. There's so much more to be discovered. You can start right now by clicking on our channel and picking your next favourite tale. There really is something for everyone, from daring heroes and mischievous creatures to magical lands and secret wonders. And remember, by subscribing, you'll be the first to know when a brand new story is ready to be enjoyed. Let's go.